mocked and told to sing as a joke. The rejected Omega opened her voice and the Alpha King stopped cold. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, back to Elena Carter. The great stone hall of the Moonfall Pack glowed with warm torchlight, polished floors reflecting gold and shadow as laughter drifted like smoke beneath the high rafters. This was the annual gathering night, a celebration meant to honor unity, strength, and tradition, yet for Elena Carter it had always been a reminder of how small she was expected to be. She stood near the outer wall where banners stirred gently in the draft, her hands folded neatly at her waist, her plain dress the color of winter ash blending into the stone behind her. Elena was an Omega without a mate, without a notable lineage, and without a voice anyone cared to hear. Around her, confident Omegas moved easily through the crowd, their smiles practiced, their laughter rewarded with approving nods from elders and guards alike. Elena kept her eyes lowered, counting the slow rhythm of her breathing, reminding herself that the night would end, that it always did. The music softened, replaced by the clink of glasses and murmured conversations as heads turned toward the raised dais where Alpha King Rowan Blackwood sat in composed silence, his presence steady and unmistakable, the kind of authority that did not need to announce itself. Elena felt it like a pressure in the air, calm and heavy, and she avoided looking in his direction, knowing better than to draw attention. A ripple of amusement broke out nearby, then grew louder, sharper, as a group of guests noticed her stillness and mistook it for invitation. Words drifted her way, light and careless, suggesting she should sing, that an Omega like her might as well provide entertainment if she had nothing else to offer. The laughter spread without malice, as if it were harmless fun, but Elena felt each sound land with weight, not cruel enough to protest, not kind enough to ignore. She was gently ushered forward by expectation alone, the open space at the center of the hall widening as people leaned back to watch. For a moment she considered stepping away, fading back into the wall where she belonged, yet something steadied inside her, a quiet resolve born not of defiance but of dignity. The hall waited, curious rather than hostile, and the torches flickered as if listening. Elena lifted her chin, feeling the stillness settle, and in that pause the world seemed to hold its breath, unaware that this night was about to become something no one would forget. Elena could feel the weight of every eye in the hall resting on her, not sharp or cruel enough to cut, but heavy with expectation, the kind that assumed she would falter. She stood at the center of the polished floor, the torches lining the walls casting a soft glow that warmed the stone beneath her feet. Her heart beat steadily now, slower than it had moments before, as if something inside her had finally found its balance. She remembered being a child, humming quietly while working, the way sound had always felt like a place she could rest, a place no one could take from her. Around her, whispers faded into an uncertain hush, curiosity replacing amusement as the seconds stretched. Elena drew in a measured breath, tasting the faint scent of pine smoke and winter herbs carried in from the outside air, and when she began to sing, it was not loud. It did not reach for attention. It simply existed, clear and steady, carrying warmth rather than spectacle. The melody flowed naturally, each note placed with care, rising and falling like a calm tide, filling the vast hall without strain. Conversation stopped, glasses lowered. Even the musicians at the far end paused, unsure of when the music had changed hands. Elena sang of quiet endurance, of nights that passed unseen and mornings that still arrived. Themes so simple, they felt universal, and as her voice carried, something shifted in the room. Faces that had worn polite smiles softened, brows knitting not in judgment, but in recognition. Near the dais, Alpha King Rowan Blackwood lifted his gaze fully for the first time that evening, his attention drawn not by command or protocol, but by instinct. He listened without moving, the steady authority. He carried settling deeper rather than pressing outward, as if the sound had reached something personal and long undisturbed. Elena did not look at him. She focused on the echo of her own voice, on the way it returned to her gentler each time, as though the hall itself had decided to listen. When the final note faded, it lingered in the air, refusing to be rushed away, and no one spoke. The silence was complete, not awkward but reverent, holding the weight of something unexpected. Elena lowered her chin slightly, her hands steady at her sides, prepared for whatever followed, yet she felt no fear. For the first time in years, she felt seen without being exposed. Somewhere behind her, a chair shifted, and the sound carried farther than it should have, signaling movement near the dais. Alpha King Rowan Blackwood rose to his feet, slowly, deliberately, the motion drawing every gaze toward him. He did not speak at once. His eyes remained fixed on Elena, thoughtful rather than stern, as if reassessing a truth he had never questioned. The room waited, breath held, aware that whatever came next would matter. Elena remained where she was, grounded by the simple fact that she had sung honestly, and nothing that followed could take that moment away. The sound of Rowan Blackwood standing seemed to ripple through the hall, not because it was loud, but because everyone felt it. The Alpha King did not rush forward, did not raise his voice, and did not command attention in the way others expected of him. He simply stepped down from the dais, his movements unhurried, measured in a way that made space open naturally before him. Elena felt the shift before she saw it, the subtle change in the air as curiosity sharpened into awareness. People who moments ago had laughed now straightened, uncertain of where they stood. Rowan stopped several feet from her, close enough that she could sense his presence without feeling overwhelmed, close enough that his attention felt deliberate rather than overwhelming. He studied her as if seeing her clearly for the first time, not as a title or a rank, but as a person who had altered the course of the evening without trying to. The silence stretched, heavy but not uncomfortable, and Elena resisted the urge to speak, trusting the quiet she had earned. When Rowan finally spoke, his voice was calm, even, yet it carried to every corner of the hall without effort. He asked who had told her to sing, not with accusation, but with a steady curiosity that invited truth rather than fear. No one answered. The laughter from earlier felt distant now, misplaced, as guests glanced at one another, unwilling to claim responsibility. Rowan nodded once, as though the silence itself was answer enough. He turned his attention back to Elena, his expression thoughtful, almost respectful. He acknowledged her voice, not praising it as entertainment, but recognizing it as something that had presence and weight, something that belonged to her alone. Elena felt warmth spread through her chest, not pride, but relief, as if something long denied had finally been named aloud. Rowan addressed the hall then, reminding everyone without harshness that talent offered in honesty was never meant to be mocked, and that moments like this revealed more about the listener than the singer. His words were simple, but they settled deeply, leaving no room for dismissal. Elena noticed how people lowered their eyes, not in shame, but in reconsideration. The evening had changed direction, and everyone felt it. Rowan offered Elena a small nod, a gesture subtle enough to be missed by anyone not watching closely, yet it felt like acknowledgement rather than permission. She inclined her head in return, not submissive, not defiant, just present. The musicians slowly resumed their place, unsure whether to play, and conversation began again in cautious murmurs, softer now, thoughtful. Elena stepped back from the center of the floor, her legs steady, her breathing even. She did not retreat to the shadows. Instead, she stood where she was, grounded by the knowledge that she had not been diminished by the moment, only revealed. Rowan returned to the dais, but the distance between them felt changed, no longer defined by rank alone. As the night continued, glances followed Elena with new curiosity, and she felt something unfamiliar settle into her posture, a quiet confidence born not from approval, but from being heard. The gathering carried on, yet beneath the music and polite laughter, a new understanding lingered, one that would not fade with the torches when dawn came. As the gathering eased into a softer rhythm, Elena felt the hall differently now, as if the stone itself remembered what had happened and refused to let it be forgotten. She moved toward the edge of the room, where tall windows looked out over the moonlit courtyard, the cool glass offering a quiet contrast to the warmth inside. Conversations flowed around her, but none pressed in, and for the first time she was not shrinking away from them. She noticed how people spoke more carefully, how laughter no longer carried that careless edge it once had. Elena rested her fingertips lightly against the window frame, grounding herself in the present moment, reminding herself that nothing about her had changed except the way she allowed herself to stand. Across the hall, Rowan Blackwood observed without appearing to. From his seat, he listened to the renewed music and polite exchanges, yet his attention returned again and again to the Omega who had altered the tone of the night without demanding space. He recognized something familiar in her composure, the quiet resilience that often went unnoticed because it did not announce itself. When the formal portion of the gathering concluded, attendants began guiding guests toward refreshments and smaller circles of conversation. Elena considered leaving early, slipping away before the weight of attention grew uncomfortable, but a calm curiosity held her in place. She accepted a glass of water from a passing server, the coolness steady in her hand, and turned as a familiar presence approached. Rowan stopped at a respectful distance, his posture relaxed, no longer framed by ceremony. He did not interrupt her thoughts, nor did he rush to speak. Instead, he acknowledged the moment they now shared, the understanding that something genuine had occurred between them without pretense. When he addressed her, his words were simple and direct, expressing appreciation not for the performance, but for the honesty she had shown. Elena met his gaze then, noticing the absence of judgment, the absence of expectation. She replied with the same clarity, thanking him for allowing the room to listen rather than dismiss. Their exchange was brief, yet it carried a depth that lingered after they parted, like an echo that refused to fade. Rowan returned to his responsibilities, but the line between ruler and observer felt thinner now, more human. Elena moved toward the exit soon after, stepping into the cool night air where the moon cast silver patterns across the stone paths. The sounds of the gathering softened behind her, replaced by the quiet hum of the sleeping pack. Grounds. She paused beneath the open sky, breathing deeply, aware that the night had marked her in a way no rejection ever could. She did not know what tomorrow would bring, or how others would treat her once the memory settled, but she knew this moment belonged to her. As she walked away from the hall, her steps were unhurried, her shoulders relaxed, carrying with her the certainty that her voice had value simply because it was hers. Inside, Rowan watched her departure from a distance, noting the steadiness of her stride, the absence of doubt. He understood then that the gathering had revealed more than a hidden talent. It had revealed a strength shaped by patience and quiet courage, and he suspected that this was only the beginning of a story the pack had not yet learned how to tell. Morning arrived quietly over the Moonfall pack, pale light slipping between tall pines and settling over stone paths still cool with dew. Elena woke earlier than usual, not from worry, but from a calm alertness she had not felt in years. The events of the night before returned to her not as a rush, but as a steady presence, like a hand resting at her back. She dressed simply and stepped outside, the air crisp and clean, carrying the scent of earth and distant water. As she walked through the grounds, she noticed subtle changes in how others moved around her. Some offered polite nods, others brief smiles that felt tentative but genuine, and no one looked through her as if she were invisible. The pack was adjusting, slowly, to a new understanding. Elena spent the morning tending to her usual tasks, humming softly as she worked, her voice low and private, meant only for herself. The sound grounded her, reminding her that singing had always been part of her, long before anyone noticed. Near midday, a formal message reached her, delivered with respectful care, requesting her presence later that afternoon at the Eastern Overlook, a quiet place reserved for reflection rather than ceremony. Elena felt a flicker of curiosity rather than fear. She knew who the invitation was from without needing to be told. When she arrived, Rowan Blackwood was already there, standing near the stone railing, the valley spread wide below him. He turned as she approached, his expression open, thoughtful, as if continuing a conversation that had simply paused rather than ended. He thanked her for coming and spoke of the gathering, not as an event, but as a moment that had revealed something important about the pack and about himself. He admitted that leadership often trained him to listen for challenge and noise, not for quiet truths offered without demand. Elena listened carefully, appreciating the honesty in his words. When she spoke, she shared that she had never intended to change anything, only to remain true to herself in a moment when retreat felt easier. Rowan considered this, nodding slowly, acknowledging the strength it took to stand without certainty of outcome. Their conversation flowed naturally, touching on music, on memory, on the small ways people were shaped by how they were seen. There was no rush, no pressure, only mutual respect unfolding at its own pace. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the overlook, Rowan offered Elena an invitation to return for future gatherings, not as a curiosity, but as someone whose presence mattered. He made it clear that the choice was hers alone. Elena felt gratitude rise within her, not for the opportunity, but for the freedom in which it was given. She agreed to consider it, knowing that whatever path she chose would be one she walked by her own will. When they parted, there was no grand gesture, only a shared understanding that something had shifted quietly, permanently. Elena left the overlook with a steady heart, aware that her place in the world had not been granted by a single night, but revealed by it. From the distance, Rowan watched her go, recognizing that true change rarely announced itself loudly, and that the most enduring transformations often began with a single honest voice carried on still air. The days that followed unfolded with an unspoken awareness rippling through the Moonfall Pack, subtle but persistent, like a current beneath calm water. Elena noticed it in small ways as she moved through her routines, in how conversations paused when she entered a space, not out of discomfort but attention, and in how her presence was acknowledged without being questioned. She did not seek this change, nor did she shrink from it. Instead, she allowed herself to exist within it naturally, trusting the steadiness she had found. Each evening, as the sun lowered behind the hills, she returned to the quiet clearing. Near her home, a place where she often practiced her singing softly, letting the notes rise and fall with the wind. It was there, one evening, that Rowan Blackwood approached again, this time without formality, without escort or announcement. He stood at the edge of the clearing, listening before revealing himself, respecting the space she had chosen. When Elena noticed him, she did not startle. She finished the phrase she was singing and allowed the sound to fade before turning toward him. Rowan acknowledged her with a gentle inclination of his head, expressing appreciation for the way she honored silence as much as sound. They spoke then about the pack, about the responsibilities that weighed on him, and about the unseen burdens that often rested on those who were overlooked. Rowan admitted that leadership had taught him to be vigilant, but not always to be receptive, and that her voice had reminded him of the importance of listening without expectation. Elena shared that she had spent much of her life believing her role was to remain unnoticed, and that finding her voice had not changed who she was, only how she saw herself. Their conversation carried no urgency, only a quiet unfolding of mutual understanding. As twilight deepened, Rowan spoke of a council gathering approaching, one that would shape the direction of the pack in the coming seasons. He asked Elena if she would be willing to attend, not to perform, but to be present, to represent the quieter strengths that often went unheard. He emphasized that the invitation carried no obligation, only respect. Elena considered this carefully, feeling the weight of the request without fear. She recognized the trust implicit in his words and the opportunity to stand not for herself alone, but for others like her. She agreed to attend, on the condition that she would remain true to herself, without pretense or display. Rowan accepted this without hesitation, assuring her that authenticity was precisely what the pack needed. When they parted, the air felt lighter, as if the night itself approved. Elena watched Rowan leave, aware that their paths were beginning to align in ways neither of them had anticipated. Alone again, she sang softly, not for an audience, but for the simple joy of expression, her voice carrying confidence, shaped by understanding rather than approval. In the distance, Rowan paused once, listening to the faint melody, drifting through the trees, recognizing that the strength he sought to cultivate within the pack was already present, waiting only to be acknowledged. The day of the council gathering arrived beneath a sky washed clean by early light, the air carrying a sense of quiet expectancy across the Moonfall Pack grounds. Elena approached the council hall with measured steps, aware of the significance of the moment without allowing it to weigh her down. She wore the same simple style she always favored, choosing comfort and honesty over display. And as she entered, she felt the familiar stone and timber surround her like a steady heartbeat. Members of the council assembled in a wide circle, elders and representatives speaking in calm, deliberate tones as matters of resources, borders, and tradition were raised. Elena took her place along the outer edge, exactly where she had been invited to stand, present without spectacle. Rowan Blackwood presided with his usual composure, listening carefully, guiding discussion without dominating it. As the council progressed, voices grew firmer, opinions more entrenched, and the familiar patterns of authority began to surface, favoring strength that could be measured and seen. Elena listened, recognizing the rhythm of debate that left little room for quieter contributions. When a discussion arose about unity within the pack, several members spoke of discipline and hierarchy, of maintaining order through clear lines of power. Elena felt a subtle tension settle in the room, the kind that preceded division rather than harmony. Rowan noticed it too, and after a pause, he invited perspectives that had not yet been heard. The silence that followed was brief, but telling. Elena felt a gentle nudge of awareness within herself, not urgency, but readiness. She stepped forward slightly, enough to be seen, and when she spoke, her voice was steady, calm, and clear, carrying without strain. She spoke of unity not as uniformity, but as understanding, of strength that came from listening as much as leading, and of how overlooked voices often carried insight shaped by endurance rather than dominance. Her words were not dramatic, nor were they confrontational, but they resonated with a truth that settled into the hall like light through clear water. Faces turned toward her, some curious, some thoughtful, a few uncertain. Rowan watched closely, noting how the room shifted not in opposition, but in reflection. When Elena finished, she did not wait for approval. She simply stepped back, trusting that what needed to be heard had been said. Rowan acknowledged her contribution with a calm nod and addressed the council, reinforcing the value of perspectives that strengthened the pack through balance rather than force. The discussion resumed with a new tone, more measured, more inclusive, as members reconsidered their positions. By the time the council adjourned, the atmosphere felt changed, as though a door had been opened that could not be closed again. As people began to disperse, several approached Elena with quiet words of appreciation, not praise, but recognition. She received them with grace, remaining true to herself. Rowan joined her briefly near the entrance, thanking her for speaking when it mattered. He expressed that her presence had done exactly what he had hoped, reminding the pack of a strength they had forgotten how to name. Elena smiled softly, acknowledging the shared effort rather than accepting sole credit. As she left the hall, the path ahead felt clearer, not because it was defined, but because she trusted herself to walk it. From behind, Rowan watched her go, understanding that leadership was not only about guiding others forward, but about recognizing when someone else had quietly shown the way. The days after the council gathering carried a quieter clarity through the Moonfall pack, as if decisions made in calm had begun to settle into the bones of daily life. Elena noticed how conversations shifted around her, not with urgency, but with consideration, and how people who once hurried past now met her gaze with a nod that held respect rather than curiosity. She continued her routines, tending to tasks with the same care she always had, yet there was a new steadiness in her movements, a confidence shaped by trust in her own voice. One afternoon, Rowan Blackwood requested a walk along the ridge path that overlooked the valley, a place known for reflection rather than formality. They walked side by side at an easy pace, the wind carrying the scent of pine and sun-warmed stone. Rowan spoke of the council outcomes, of plans to encourage more open dialogue within the pack, and of his intention to cultivate leadership that listened as much as it guided. He acknowledged Elena's role in this shift, not as a symbol, but as a reminder of balance. Elena listened, appreciating the way he framed responsibility as shared rather than imposed. She shared her own reflections, admitting that being heard had not erased her doubts, but it had given her the courage to move alongside them rather than be ruled by them. As they walked, silence fell naturally between them, comfortable and unforced, each step reinforcing the sense that they were learning from one another. At the ridge, they paused, looking out over the land that stretched wide and steady below. Rowan spoke thoughtfully about leadership as stewardship, about protecting not only territory, but the unseen strengths that sustained a community over time. Elena responded with equal care, speaking of patience, of how endurance often grew quietly where no one thought to look. Their exchange carried no grand declarations, only mutual recognition. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the valley, Rowan turned to Elena with a seriousness tempered by respect. He shared that the pack would soon gather again, this time not for ceremony, but for renewal, and that he wished for her to stand with him openly, not elevated, but acknowledged. He emphasized that the choice remained hers, free of expectation. Elena considered the request, feeling the weight of it without pressure. She understood that acceptance would mean visibility, and with it responsibility, yet she also recognized that the path she had already chosen led forward, not back. She agreed, not as a gesture of ambition, but as an act of alignment with the values she had spoken aloud. Rowan accepted her answer with quiet appreciation, his expression reflecting understanding rather than triumph. As they turned back toward the pack grounds, the sky deepened into evening, and the first stars emerged, steady and bright. Elena felt a sense of calm settle within her, knowing that whatever unfolded next would be faced honestly. From the ridge, the Moonfall pack looked peaceful, shaped by generations of strength and care, and she felt ready to take her place within that ongoing story. Rowan walked beside her, aware that leadership shared with integrity grew stronger, not weaker, and that the future he envisioned was already taking form through quiet, deliberate steps. The night of renewal arrived beneath a sky clear enough to hold every star in quiet witness, and the Moonfall pack gathered not in the grand hall, but in the open circle where the land met the sky. Lanterns glowed softly along the perimeter, their lights steady and warm, and the air carried the calm of intention rather than ceremony. Elena stood beside Rowan Blackwood as the pack assembled, not elevated above anyone, not hidden at the edge, simply present, her posture relaxed and grounded. She felt the familiar hum of anticipation, but it did not unsettle her. It felt earned. Rowan addressed the pack with measured clarity, speaking of continuity and care, of choices made together, and of a future shaped by listening as much as leading. His words were not grand, yet they resonated because they reflected what people had already begun to feel. When he spoke of balance, his gaze did not linger on Elena, but the understanding was shared, woven into the moment without display. As the gathering settled into quiet reflection, Elena stepped forward at Rowan's invitation, not to perform, not to persuade, but to offer presence. She took a breath, feeling the cool night air fill her chest, and when she spoke, her voice was calm and certain, carrying easily across the circle. She spoke of belonging as a practice rather than a title, of strength that grew through patience, and of the courage it took to be gentle in a world that often mistook volume for power. Her words flowed without effort, shaped by lived truth rather than ambition. The pack listened, not out of obligation, but recognition, and in that listening, something settled into place. When she finished, there was no applause, no rush to respond, only a deep, shared stillness that felt like agreement. Rowan met her eyes then, and in that moment, the distance between Alpha King and Omega dissolved into mutual respect. He acknowledged her contribution openly, affirming that the path forward would be walked together, guided by voices willing to speak honestly and hearts willing to hear. The pack responded not with cheers, but with nods and quiet affirmation, a collective understanding taking root. As the gathering concluded, people lingered beneath the stars, conversations unfolding with ease, and Elena moved among them naturally, no longer defined by rejection, no longer constrained by expectation. She felt the continuity of her own journey, from silence to voice, from unseen to acknowledged, and she knew it had not changed who she was, only revealed her strength. Later, as the lanterns dimmed and the night deepened, Elena stood at the edge of the circle, watching the stars wheel slowly overhead. Rowan joined her without ceremony, sharing the view, and for a time they said nothing. The land stretched wide and steady before them, reflecting a future built not on dominance, but trust. Elena felt a quiet certainty settle within her, the kind that did not demand proof. From this night forward, her voice would not be asked as a joke, nor offered as entertainment. It would be recognized as it had always been, honest, steady, and worthy. And as the Moonfall Pack turned toward what came next, the story they carried forward would remember this moment, when true strength revealed itself through listening, and leadership learned the power of standing still.